Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. Viewers, earlier this week, the Income Tax Department sleuths visited the offices of the British Broadcasting Corporation in Delhi and Mumbai. Later on, it was given out that these visits of the officers, which lasted for about 2.5 days, were what the department calls a survey, whereas political activists and other people, especially some media organizations, have called them what is a typical IT raid. What is the difference? What are the charges? Why has the BBC been given notices after notices? We'll try to understand all this, and also why are political parties and media organizations connecting this IT action to a recent BBC documentary aired on the Modi government. Let's cut straight to our guests. I am joined here in the studio by Mr. Ved Jain, well-known lawyer, expert on revenue, tax and related issues. He is also the former chief of the ICAI.
Thank you.
Welcome to Media Scan, sir. Great to have you in our studios.
Thank you, madam.
And also with me, joining online, Praful Ketkar, senior journalist, editor of The Organizer, well-known author. Welcome back, Praful Ketkar.
Namaste, namaste.
Also with me, another senior seasoned journalist, Aditi Tandon. Aditi has been watching the Congress, its politics for quite a long time now. She is a senior editor in the Tribune and along with the Congress has been following the politics of the Congress and its allies. Welcome back to Media Scan, Aditi.
Thank you so much, Smita.
And my first question comes to you, sir. Mr. Ved Jain, as you know, there has been a lot of debate, a lot of speculation over why the Income Tax Department officials reached the BBC headquarters here in India. We have been told that this is what the IT department calls a survey. We have also learned that there have been repeated notices to the BBC over differential pricing, issues related to profits, etc., and they ignored those notices. But most of the people reported and spoke about this visit of the officers as an income tax raid. Is there a difference, sir? And if yes, can you tell us, for the benefit of our viewers, why the situations are different?
I believe it's a ignorance of the law of income tax by and large. That's why the people are just trying to mix up survey with the search and seizure, which we call in the.
Okay.
You see, when you are operating in India, every person is liable to pay tax on the income which is arising in India.
Okay.
Now, a resident is liable to pay tax on a global income. A non-resident is liable to pay tax on the income which arises in India. BBC has been operating in India, there is no issue, and it has a source of income in India also. Now the issue which arises for is that what the income tax department has done. Now the law permits, income tax permit, that whatever you are filing document before the tax authorities, a verification has to be carried out, what we call an assessment and verification. Now, in addition thereto, the power has been given to Income Tax Department that in case on the basis of the information which they are trying to collect, they are not getting satisfied and they believe a physical verification need to be carried out at the premises where the business is being operated. So, a normal process is to carry out a survey. A survey is to assess what you are doing, how you are doing, and whether what you are showing in the books of account it matches and it is correct or not. It is a physical verification process.
Okay, so why is it not a raid?
In search, what happened is search has a certain precondition. A raid, a search is carried out when the officer, a senior level officer, director which we call it, he records a satisfaction that the person concerned is having undisclosed income or assets or some income or asset which he is not likely to disclose. So that is the provision which is invoked for carrying out a search and seizure. I believe in the case of BBC, it is not a case of a search because there is no satisfaction recorded to the effect that BBC is concealing income or undisclosed income. It is only a survey to carry out and assess what you have stated in the pay document which you have filed before the tax authority, they are correct or not, And what I have learned from the media report, etc., and what I have been coming out from the income tax department press release also, it is basically an issue of a transfer pricing and at a determination of the price at arm's length. Now, under
So
the
I think, sir, this issue of transfer pricing and why there is differential pricing and how it happens that the profits, are not, the taxes over the profits do not reach the government as they should. I think these are quite issues that we need an in-depth understanding. So I will first like to come to my other guests on the show. And if I may come to Praful Ketkar, Mr. Ketkar, many decades ago, Subhash Chandra Bose had called the BBC the Bluff and Bluster Corporation. Since then, it's been about more than 7 decades, and there have been multiple situations, at least half a dozen very serious occasions, when the BBC has been accused by the Indian establishment, by our governments and the people of deliberately trying to malign the image of our country. How far do you agree to this discussion and your take on the recent development, particularly the political response that we are seeing following the IT action in the BBC offices?
Namaste. Smita ji, what I believe is it is but obvious that in political circles, or for that matter, even in media circles, two things will be linked. One is a documentary and the other is the IT survey. But what I understand from the reports that the investigation when it comes to the income tax is not new. So if we go into the details, and it requires a little bit of legwork, and you need to work on your resources and speak to experts like Mr. Jain to understand the things when the investigation actually started and how it has been going on. Just for the benefit of viewers, I'm just making one thing clear, that similar investigations have been taking place against BBC even in the United Kingdom, and that is specifically related to the tax evasion and what was called in 2016 and 2018 on the basis of complaints made by the BBC, one of the BBC employees, that this is an industrial scale tax evasion. So even in the United Kingdom, there has been these cases of tax evasion and subsequent investigation against the BBC. But when it comes to this particular issue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose calling BBC a bluff and bluster corporation, and if we see the colonial mindset of BBC, this was in specific reference to the mindset of BBC.
Yes.
Every media house has its own, political bias. If you see the recent coverage of BBC of Assam government's, action on child marriage issue, if you take a consistent coverage of BBC on, say, Jammu Kashmir related issues, if you see the way the BBC covers entire economic development in India, the way Hindu festivals are covered, the way the Indian leadership and including for that matter Mahatma Gandhi up to Prime Minister Modi, how they have covered, it clearly shows that there is in the name of reputation, there is an inherent bias rooted in the colonial mindset, and it is reflected at 3 levels: at the level of selection, at the level of omission, and at the level of presentation. These 3 biases needs to be analyzed and then reputed.
And you are saying that these biases have been on for decades. It's not like something has erupted right now.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you see the way BBC had covered, say, First and the Second World War, for instance, on behalf of, we cannot forget that BBC is in 1920s. Came as an entity coming from with the support of British Church, and then British government, it eventually formed with the support from the taxpayers' money.
Right, I'll come to that. I'll come to how, you know, it is funded by the taxpayers' money, but we know how things have panned out since then. But before that, allow me to bring in Aditi Tandon here. Aditi, there is a long list of complaints that Praful Ketkar has raised, or rather I would say concerns with regard to the BBC. But Aditi, very frankly, I mean, if we go back to what happened in 71 or even more recent occasions, there have been very serious complaints about the BBC from senior Congress persons, their leadership. In fact, the Congress-led Indira Gandhi's government was the first one which did not allow the BBC to operate for more than 2 years on Indian soil. My question is, why is the Congress party, also the TMC, but more particularly the Congress, taking such a strident position in support of the BBC when the question is about the reputation of the country, painting India in a particular light?
Yeah, I think what you said is extremely relevant, Smita, because Indira Gandhi, late Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the first actually to dispel the BBC from India. As you recall, there were two very negative documentaries that had portrayed India in an extremely, biased and a negative light. Poverty, slums of India were shown in a certain particular light. These were called Calcutta and Phantom. And in the summer of 1972, as you rightly said, late Indira Gandhi had banned the BBC from India. And then again in 1975, a group of Congress MPs had actually written to then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to ban the BBC, and the BBC was expelled from India. So, this knowledge of history is extremely important when you look at the current Congress response against IT surveys on BBC offices in Delhi and Bombay. The Congress, I think, Smita, is looking at everything from the political and electoral prism right now. Let us not forget that this is a year in which 9 states of India are going into elections, followed closely by the 2024 general election, which will be a make or break election for the Congress party. As you know, Congress has been in electoral decline for a while, except that they won Himachal.
I think this merits a very quick cross question, Aditi. It's all fine that this is a very crucial election year in the country, and this is ahead of the big general elections in 2024. Seriously, I mean, how does it connect with what the BBC is trying to do to our country? The same BBC which never agrees to show Jammu Kashmir as a part of our country. Does the Congress really think that taking such a strident position in favor of the BBC or calling it intimidation, this IT action, is going to sort of cut ice with the Indian voters? Because Britain is not going to vote in 24. It will be the Indian citizens.
You see, that's the point I'm trying to make, Smita. Congress is faced with a drought of issues to take on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As far as I can observe the Congress from a distance, the party just rolls from one issue to another. In the recent budget session of Parliament, they mounted a massive offensive on the Adani matter.
Yes.
And the day IT surveys began on BBC offices, the first comment from AICC communications in charge, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, was that, on the one hand, the Congress is demanding a JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee, into the Adani issue, and on the other, the government has opened these surveys of IT against the BBC. So the Congress was actually trying to say that BBC issue is a deflection of the government from the Adani issue. So, Congress is finding it hard to cling to issues, to, make allegations of corruption stick on Prime Minister.
Got it. So perhaps there is some, contradiction in their own positions, and they are unable to prioritize which agendas to take up in what manner, how seriously. But Aditi, I'll come back to Ved Jain here. Mr. Jain, you were talking about differential pricing and how it matters in the tax laws of the country. This is slightly technical, but if you could explain it in, a person's language like mine for the benefit of our viewers, why differential pricing matters in this case? How are they able to, sort of steal taxes from which they make out of profits here? Secondly, and thirdly, most important, Is this a crime in the eyes of the law? If the survey shows them in a negative manner, what can follow?
See, let me first clarify, survey is not an investigation. Survey
Right.
is a verification. So when survey is carried out, it is for the purpose of verification only. Investigation is something different. That's the issue. One.
So will investigation follow here?
No, investigation obviously. If something comes out from the survey, then obviously investigation will follow.
Right.
Now the second issue which is important is to understand for what purpose the survey has been carried out. See, when you are a resident, you are supposed to pay tax on global income, so there is no issue, but wherever you earn income, you pay tax. But when you are a non-resident, you are supposed to pay tax on Indian income, and whatever accrues outside India is not your income. Now BBC headquartered is in UK,
Yes.
London, and we have an operating office in India. So certain income which BBC should receive, India should receive from the UK. At the same time, certain expenses which BBC India should pay to BBC UK in order to get certain facilities. Maybe support services are coming from UK, London, BBC. Maybe some other technical services are being provided. Maybe inputs are going from, that is the expenditure which they are asking for. Similarly, when BBC India is giving some inputs to BBC UK, so now BBC India should get income because of the input which they are giving.
So this is the
This is the
differential
price. Now,
pricing.
at the
Yes.
price at which you are charging expenditure or recovering your income, that is it we call price. Since you are recovering this price from your sister concern, because it's separate,
Yes.
that's why we use the word transfer pricing. So it is not really a price, it is a transfer price. You are charging a price from your sister concern, that is a transfer. And that's what called. And the law is very clear that such price should be at arm's length. Arm's length means which is a fair market value. Have you rendered these services to somebody else unknown, what charges you would have recovered or what expenditure you would have given to that person. That is we call arm's length price. So now, as per I get the information, so BBC was being asked to support whatever the expenditure they are claiming from the BBC, BBC UK was claiming from India, and whatever BBC was charging income from BBC, please support it with a study. And that's a law which mandate that you have to carry out a study which we call TP study, transfer pricing study, and they support it. And
So we
probably
do
they have not been cooperating
we here
on that
on
issue.
Doordarshan, we do not want to preempt any investigation of a central agency, sir. But from your understanding of the entire case and the background that has been given out about repeated notices, do you think the IT sleuths had enough reason, enough background information to reach the BBC offices, because somewhere the BBC may be stealing taxes from our country?
See, issue is very simple. See, what is being asked is what is said that they have been issued notices. Please give your support, your whatever you are saying with document, etc.
Right.
And they have not been responding to. Then if you don't respond to the queries which are being raised, then obviously the tax department will like to come and collect material and evidences and ask your people who are employees there that tell us these are the questions, please answer it. I believe in the
Right. So when repeated notices, repeated explanations are not being responded to, it does raise some suspicion. I'd like to come to Praful Ketkar here. Mr. Ketkar, Aditi was just telling us how the Congress has been hurtling from one issue to another. And if the Adani issue was such a, a hot issue for them, need they have gone into the BBC controversy and taken such a strident position in favor of the BBC? But my question to you is, do you also agree that the Congress is facing a dearth of issues, or there are enough issues which the opposition is actually not looking at, not touching? Where do you think the confusion lies?
The confusion lies clearly, Smitaji, at three levels, especially when it comes to Congress. One is at the level of ideology. When it comes to Indian politics, three ingredients are very critical. One is what is your ideological position, whether Congress wants to go all out, conventional way of its own version of secularism, or they want to play it soft Hindutva. They are not clear about it.
No, one second, Mr. Ketkar. What has Hindutva or even secularism got to do with this IT action on a foreign broadcasting body.
No, I'm not linking it to, but the Congress would like it to, and Congress has got this tendency of linking it to secularism and communalism, any issue. What the child marriage issue and the legal action against has to do with the Hindu-Muslim angle, but BBC did that. BBC follows the same policy. That's why I'm linking it together. So you asked about the confusion. The confusion is at the ideological level, at the leadership level, and also at the tactical level. Whether to go with communist in Kerala or not, whether to take support of communists in Delhi or not. So all these confusions prevail, and this whether Hindenburg report or whether BBC documentary and now this income tax survey at the BBC premises, all these things basically show the kind of confusion that we have. BBC, quote unquote, reputed media house has its own colonial biases, and irrespective of those biases, I will stand by BBC's right to have freedom that any media should have.
Right.
The fundamental question is, does that mean BBC has a right to flout the laws of this land? Then categorically no. These two are different things. BBC will always have a right to run its media house freely when it comes to playing their issues or continuing with their omission or selection or presentation in a biased way. But when it comes to the law, especially related to financial and unity and integrity of this nation, then BBC will, like any other media house, like you or me, any media house, BBC will also have to face relevant questions related to, pertaining to those laws of this land.
Right.
BBC
And let me get a reaction from Aditi, Mr. Ketkar.
As a cover to hide the legal loopholes that they are employing, either to take certain financial benefits or to further certain agenda on behalf of somebody.
Correct. Got the point. Aditi Tandon, is it true that the BBC may have been trying to use its editorial heft to, sort of violate the law when it comes to pricing and taxes, etc., and the Congress or the opposition parties and also some media bodies have actually come to shield the BBC because they are also taking the same position? And also, as Mr. Ketkar said, is there ideological as well as tactical confusion in the Congress top leadership?
Smita, I'll come to your first question. The
Yes.
BBC has a checkered history of portraying India in a very negative light.
Yes.
In fact, one very important issue that we must remember is that in 1995, when the Chahar-e-Sharif shrine was being burnt down by terrorists in Kashmir, you would recall that the BBC had actually aired the footage of Russian tanks over Chechnya, and the impression in the minds of the readers that was created for some time was as if the Indian army was raging against the Chahar-e-Sharif. So it was an extremely damaging perception that the BBC sought to create, and they have survived these attempts of biased reporting. And in fact, the issue with the BBC is not specific to India alone. They have had a history of prejudicial reporting against India. They were even banned for 5 years from, all national parks and wildlife sanctuaries after they did a very biased documentary against Indian anti-poaching activities in respect of tiger conservation. You remember the BBC South Asia correspondent was banned in 2017 for 5 years. So, there has been this issue with the BBC, and the Congress, I think, Smita, is absolutely confused about where to actually stick. The issue with the Congress is that every time they have launched an offensive against the Prime Minister, you start with the Rafale jets, then you come to the Pegasus issue, then you come to the Adani issue. There's something or the other that comes up that actually takes the mind space of the voters away from principal issues, because the Supreme Court of the country appears to have taken a line that is that is actually in contrast with
That
the
is not
principle of-
supportive of the position taken by the
Exactly.
Congress.
So you can't
Aditi,
help it.
I am afraid we have very little time left on the show, and I want to ask a very pertinent question to Mr. Ved Jain also. Mr. Ved Jain, very quickly, sir, do you think, being a reputed, active worldwide, a big broadcasting house, the BBC is being targeted because of its editorial position towards the Modi government? And also, do you think being a broadcasting corporation will give it any kind of a political, passage if there has actually been violation of the law?
I think the law has to take its own course. So we have a law of the land income tax, and whether it is a British Broadcasting Corporation or a media house or however influential a person may be, politically, socially or otherwise, it has to comply with the law. And what has been done is to carry out a survey to find out, and because there is a material on record that they have not been responding to the notices. So all that has been done is to verify those material. If they are fair, they let them come and explain it. If they are not fair, of course they should face the music, whatever the consequences are therein. And I believe that there is no need to link the two.
Right.
With that. That's the most important thing is that part is a part. What you do,
No,
carry
so
out
just very quickly, sir, just 10 seconds. Are such surveys of various corporate houses, media or otherwise, quite common in our land?
Yes, it
and
is.
because it is BBC, it is becoming such a headline?
That's why I say survey is a normal process, and I said in the beginning it is a verification which is carried out in a normal business house. It is carried out, and there are ground rules, a standard
Right.
operating procedure under which it has to be carried out. So it is nothing new for which has been carried out.
So, as Mr. Jain has made it very clear to all of us and our viewers, it was expected and perhaps obvious that if the IT sleuths reached the BBC offices in India, it would obviously get connected to the BBC documentary aired recently, which by itself created a huge row. But in the eyes of a law-knowing person, as our senior journalists have told us, as Mr. Jain has explained, if the BBC is right and has not violated the law of the land, they need not worry. All this political statement making, all this political positioning will come to nothing if there has been truly a violation of the law. In either case, there is no reason to connect the two issues. On that note, I want to thank all three of our guests here, Mr. Ved Jain, who took the trouble of coming to our studios, Aditi Tandon, senior journalist, and Praful Ketkar, who have explained the political angles attached to it so well to our viewers. Thank you to all of you. And with that, it's a wind up on Media Scan for this evening. But see you next week. Another weekend, another big issue. Namaskar.